Ethan lifted his champagne glass with the confidence of a man who loved being the center of attention. 10 years, he said, grinning as everyone around the banquet table applauded. Can you believe Mimi's put up with me that long? Laughter rolled through the room. He turned toward me, smiling like he was about to say something sweet. I guess life doesn't always work out the way you expect, he shrugged dramatically. Sometimes your first plan doesn't happen, so you marry your backup plan. For half a second, the room went silent. Then someone laughed. Another joined in. Within moments, nearly everyone at the table was laughing. My husband's best friend slapped him on the shoulder. Oh, that's brutal. Ethan laughed even harder. Relax, he said, pointing at me with his glass. She knows I'm kidding. Every phone recording our anniversary was still aimed at us. Every smile in the room was waiting for mine. I looked around the table. My parents stared at their plates. My sister-in-law's smile faded. A cousin quickly took another sip of wine. No one told him he'd gone too far. No one asked if I was okay. I smiled because there was nothing else to do. But inside, something quietly ended. What nobody at that table knew was that before the night was over, I would leave my husband without saying a single word. And by the time he realized, I wasn't coming back. It would already be too late. The rest of the evening continued as though nothing had happened. Music played softly through the restaurant. Plates of dessert arrived. People stood to take anniversary photos beneath the gold balloons that spelled *** 10 years. Every few minutes someone repeated Ethan's joke. I still can't believe you called her your backup plan. He always knows how to get a laugh. Ethan soaked up every bit of attention. He wrapped an arm around my shoulders whenever someone looked our way, playing the role of the affectionate husband. If anyone had glanced at me for more than a second, they would have noticed I never leaned back into him. Instead, I smiled for every picture. I thanked relatives for coming. I hugged friends goodbye. I never mentioned the toast. On the drive home, Ethan acted as if nothing unusual had happened. See, he said, loosening his tie. Great party. I stared out the passenger window. It was memorable. He chuckled. You're not still thinking about the joke, are you? I didn't answer. Apparently, silence sounded enough like forgiveness to him. When we reached the house, he changed into jeans while checking his phone. The guys are meeting downtown for one more drink, he said casually. They've been planning it all week. I looked at him. Tonight. It's just for an hour. He kissed my forehead without waiting for a response. Don't stay up. 10 minutes later, I heard his car disappear down the street. The house became perfectly still. I walked upstairs, opened the closet, pulled out 2 large suitcases. One by one, I folded clothes without rushing. Then I opened the velvet box containing the anniversary gift I'd planned to give him. I looked at it for several seconds before quietly closing the lid again. Next, I slipped my wedding ring off my finger and placed it beside the unopened gift. No note. No explanation. No goodbye. Just absence. By the time I carried the last suitcase to my car, midnight had passed. I didn't look back at the house. I simply drove away. 20 minutes later, my phone vibrated on the passenger seat. The screen lit up with Ethan's name. One message. Where are you? The messages multiplied before sunrise. Ethan, where did you go? A minute later. Ethan, answer your phone. Then another. Ethan, if this is about the joke, you're seriously overreacting. By the time I woke up in my sister Rachel's guest room, there were 38 unread texts and 6 missed calls. Rachel walked in carrying 2 mugs of coffee. She glanced at my phone lighting up again. He still doesn't know where you are. I shook my head. He knows I'm gone. She handed me a mug. That's not the same thing. The phone buzzed again. Ethan, asterisk come home so we can talk like adults. I locked the screen without replying. Rachel sat beside me. You don't owe him an answer until you're ready. For the first time since leaving, I let myself breathe. The silence in Rachel's house felt completely different from the silence in mine. Nobody expected me to smile. Nobody expected me to pretend everything was fine. Around noon, Ethan finally called from a different number. I answered before I could change my mind. Mimi. His voice sounded irritated more than relieved. There you are. I didn't speak. You disappeared in the middle of the night. You noticed. Don't do that. I'm asking because I'm curious, I said evenly. When exactly did you notice? He hesitated. I got home. So, after celebrating with your friends. It was one drink. It wasn't about the drink. Another pause. Then he sighed dramatically. You're making this into something it isn't. You called me your backup plan. It was a joke. It wasn't funny. It wasn't supposed to be taken literally. His tone shifted into the familiar, one I'd heard for years. The calm, patient voice that somehow made every disagreement sound like my misunderstanding. You've always been sensitive. Rachel looked at me from across the kitchen. She'd heard enough of these conversations over the years to know exactly where they ended. Usually with me apologizing. Not this time. I'll call you when I'm ready. Mimi. I ended the call. That afternoon, Rachel pulled an old photo album from the bookshelf. You remember this trip? It was our 3rd anniversary. Ethan and I stood on a hiking trail, smiling into the camera. I remembered canceling an important certification course because he wanted a spontaneous vacation. At the time, it had felt romantic. Now it felt familiar. Another page. The year after that. A picture outside our 2nd apartment. I'd accepted a transfer to another city because Ethan's new job had more potential. I left coworkers I loved without complaining. Another page. Christmas with his parents. His mother smiling proudly. Me serving dinner while everyone else opened gifts. I had barely noticed then. Now every picture looked different. Rachel quietly closed the album. You've always been the one adjusting. I stared at the cover. She wasn't wrong. Every major decision in our marriage had somehow become my compromise. When Ethan wasn't ready to have children, we waited. When Ethan wanted to move, we packed. When Ethan wanted another chance at a risky business idea, we emptied our savings. Every sacrifice had sounded temporary. Together, they had become my entire marriage. The next morning, I logged into our shared cloud storage. Not because I wanted memories. Because I needed documents. Insurance papers. Tax files. Bank statements. Before changing my passwords, I decided to download our photos. Thousands of pictures loaded across the screen. Vacations. Birthdays. Family dinners. Then something unusual caught my eye. A folder labeled *screenshots*. I frowned. I almost never saved screenshots. Curious, I opened it. Most were random. Directions. Receipts. Shopping lists. Then one thumbnail froze me. A messaging app. A woman's profile picture. I didn't recognize her face. Before I could enlarge the image, the folder refreshed. One by one. The screenshots disappeared. Every last one. I stared at the empty screen. Someone else had just deleted them. Only one question kept repeating in my mind. Why would Ethan erase something after I'd already walked away? My phone buzzed nonstop the next morning, but this time it wasn't Ethan. It was the family group chat. Someone had uploaded the anniversary video. The title read, 10 Amazing Years of Ethan and Mimi Red. I hesitated before pressing play. The camera shook slightly as whoever filmed it zoomed toward our table. Ethan stood with his champagne glass raised, smiling exactly as I remembered. Then came the words. Sometimes your first plan doesn't happen, so you marry your backup plan. The laughter sounded even louder through a phone speaker. This time, I wasn't living the moment. I was watching it, watching my own smile disappear, watching myself glance around the room, searching for someone, anyone, to stop laughing. Nobody did. The video ended before the camera captured me looking away. Within minutes, messages started appearing beneath it. Uncle David, asterisk classic Ethan. Cousin Melissa, asterisk he's always joking. Then another. Aunt Linda, asterisk, did anyone else notice Mimi didn't laugh? The conversation slowed. Someone reacted with a sad emoji. Another person quietly deleted their earlier laughing response. For the first time, people weren't hearing Ethan's joke. They were seeing my face. By lunchtime, relatives began calling. I ignored most of them. Rachel answered one, while I stood in the kitchen making tea. "It's my mom," she whispered. "Tell her I'm okay." Rachel nodded before putting the phone on speaker. "Mimi." "I'm here." "Honey, where are you?" "I'm safe." A long pause. "We've been calling Ethan." "I figured. He said you needed some space." I almost laughed. "That's what he told everyone. He said you were emotional after the party." Rachel's expression hardened. My mother continued gently. "He told us you'd probably come home once you calmed down." I looked out the window. The strange thing wasn't that Ethan had lied. It was how naturally the lie came to him. He had already started writing the story before I had spoken a single word. "I'm not coming home today," I said quietly. Another silence. Then my mother answered. "I understand." It wasn't approval, but it wasn't pressure either. For the first time, someone had accepted my decision without trying to explain it away. That evening, Ethan called again. This time I answered. "Mimi." His voice sounded strained. "People keep asking questions." I imagined they would. "I told everyone we're working things out." "I never said that." "You don't have to embarrass me like this." The words settled between us. Embarrass him. Not hurt me. Not humiliate me. Embarrass him. "You embarrassed yourself," I replied. "I made one joke. You made one choice." He exhaled sharply. "Please stop talking to everyone." "I haven't. I know how families work. People gossip." Before I could answer, another call flashed across my screen. Daniel Harper. Ethan's closest friend. I ignored Ethan. "I'm taking another call." "Mimi." I ended it. Daniel waited a few seconds before speaking. "I wasn't sure you'd answer." "I almost didn't." "I don't blame you." His voice lacked the easy confidence he usually carried. "I've been thinking about Saturday night." "So have I." I should have said something. "You didn't." "I know." Neither of us spoke for several moments. Finally, he sighed. "The joke wasn't funny." "No." "And honestly," he hesitated, "it wasn't really a joke." I felt myself straighten in the chair. "What do you mean?" Daniel chose his words carefully. "The guys have been hearing about someone for months." "Someone?" "Ethan's old girlfriend." The room seemed to shrink around me. "He kept bringing her up whenever we'd meet after work." "What did he say?" "Mostly memories." Daniel paused. Then it became what ifs. I said nothing. We all assumed he was just wondering how life would have turned out. "And you believed that?" "I wanted to." Daniel sounded ashamed. But after the toast, he let the sentence trail off. I started wondering whether he'd actually meant what he said. A notification interrupted the silence. Daniel had sent a photo. I opened it. It showed the outdoor patio of a quiet restaurant. At one table sat Ethan. Across from him sat a woman with shoulder-length dark hair. They weren't touching. They weren't embracing. They simply leaned toward each other in conversation. The timestamp caught my attention first. 3 weeks earlier. The exact evening Ethan had texted me from what he claimed was a late client meeting. I zoomed in. The restaurant logo was visible on a menu behind them. There was no mistake. When was this taken? I asked. I took it by accident, Daniel admitted. My wife and I were celebrating our anniversary there. You never told me. I honestly thought it was business until Saturday. My stomach tightened. Business meetings didn't usually happen with former girlfriends. And they certainly weren't hidden. I don't know what happened between them, Daniel continued. I'm not accusing him of having an affair. But you knew I deserved to see this. Yes. I stared at the photo for a long time. Standing alone, it proved almost nothing. Placed beside the anniversary toast. It changed everything. For the first time, I couldn't dismiss the possibility that Ethan hadn't humiliated me for a laugh. He'd simply spoken the truth out loud. At that exact moment, my phone rang again. Ethan. I answered without saying a word. His voice came immediately. Please. He sounded different now. Don't believe what they're telling you. I didn't answer him. For several seconds, all I heard was his breathing through the phone. Mimi, he asked quietly. I ended the call. Then I turned my phone over on the table and looked at Rachel. I think I'm done guessing. She nodded. Then stopped guessing. The next morning, I scheduled a meeting with a family law attorney. The attorney's office was nothing like I expected. There were no dramatic speeches. No pressure. Just a woman in her 50s who opened a notebook and asked practical questions. Do you own your home jointly? Yes. Any children? No. Joint accounts? Several. She explained what separation would mean, how assets would likely be divided, and what I should gather before making any permanent decisions. I listened carefully, taking notes. For the first time since the anniversary dinner, my future wasn't an emotion. It was a series of decisions. As I left her office, I realized something had shifted. Walking away no longer felt impossible. It felt organized. Back at Rachel's house, I opened the file cabinet where I'd stored digital copies of our financial records years earlier. Ethan had always joked that I was the organized one. For the first time, that habit worked in my favor. I spread bank statements, credit card summaries, and travel confirmations across the dining room table. Rachel sat across from me in silence, handing me documents whenever I asked. Most of the expenses made sense. Mortgage payments, utilities, insurance, groceries. Then I found a hotel charge. Not expensive. Just one night. 3 months earlier. I searched my calendar. That date matched the overnight conference Ethan had claimed was mandatory. A few pages later came restaurant charges. Not one. Several. Always on evenings, when he had supposedly been entertaining clients. I compared the dates with his old calendar invitations that still synced to our shared account. Some entries had been deleted. Others remained. The timelines didn't fit. None of it proved he had been physically unfaithful. But together, the records painted a different picture. A man whose explanations constantly changed, depending on who was asking. That afternoon, I made a decision I had avoided. I sent a respectful message to the woman in Daniel's photograph. I kept it simple. My name is Mimi Lawson. I'm Ethan's wife. I'm not contacting you to argue or accuse you. I'm only trying to understand the truth. If you're willing to speak with me, I'd appreciate your honesty. Hours passed without a reply. By evening, my phone vibrated. Her response was short. I didn't know he made that toast. If you're willing to meet somewhere public, I'll answer your questions. The following morning, we met in a quiet coffee shop. She introduced herself as Lauren. She looked uncomfortable before we had even ordered. I'm sorry, she said immediately. I never wanted to be part of your marriage. I studied her face. She didn't seem defensive. She seemed exhausted. I just need the truth. She nodded. Ethan contacted me about 8 months ago. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup. At first, I thought he just wanted to catch up. And then, he started talking about regrets. She looked down. He told me your marriage had lost its spark. I remained silent. He said the two of you had grown apart. My chest tightened. He asked if I'd ever wondered what would have happened if we'd stayed together. I swallowed hard. What did you tell him? I told him the past belonged in the past. She reached into her purse and placed her phone on the table. I thought that would be the end of it. She unlocked the screen. He kept messaging. One after another, she showed me the conversations. There were no romantic replies from her. Only polite refusals. Ethan's messages, however, became increasingly personal. I made the safe choice. I keep wondering what my life should have been. Maybe we still have time. Finally, there was one last exchange. Lauren had written, "Please stop contacting me. I'm not interested in reopening this chapter." After that, nothing. She looked up at me. He never heard from me again. I quietly thanked her. She reached across the table, but stopped short of touching my hand. I'm truly sorry. So am I. Not for her. For the version of my marriage I'd believed in. That afternoon, I returned to my attorney's office. This time, I didn't ask hypothetical questions. I'd like to begin the filing process. She nodded calmly. We can do that. Signing the paperwork took less than 20 minutes. 10 years of marriage. Reduced to a stack of documents and a signature. Oddly enough, I didn't cry. I felt clear. Only after everything had been filed did I agree to meet Ethan. We chose a quiet conference room at our attorney's office. Neutral ground. When I walked in, he stood immediately. Mamie. His face looked tired. I've been trying to explain. I took my seat across from him without answering. I know how this looks. It does look bad, I said evenly. But it isn't what you think. He leaned forward. I never cheated. Before he could continue, I opened my folder. Without raising my voice. Without accusing him. I slid a neat stack of printed messages across the table. Ethan looked down. His eyes stopped moving. The room fell completely silent. For several long seconds, Ethan didn't touch the papers. His eyes stayed fixed on the first page. I watched him recognize his own words. I made the safe choice. I keep wondering what my life should have been. Maybe we still have time. The confidence he'd walked into the room with disappeared. Finally, he looked up. Where did you get these? I folded my hands together. It doesn't matter. It does matter. No, I said quietly. What matters is that you wrote them. He lowered his eyes again. The silence between us stretched until he finally exhaled. I can explain. I know. You haven't even heard it. I already have. He frowned. You've been explaining for months. He rubbed both hands across his face before speaking again. I never slept with her. I know. I never had an affair. I know. His head lifted, almost surprised. You know. I know she turned you down. His shoulders stiffened. You spoke to Lauren. I did. He looked away. She told me everything. Another long silence settled over the room. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. I was confused. I shook my head. No, I was. You weren't confused. He stared at me. You knew exactly what you wanted. I leaned forward. You wanted another chance with the woman you believed was the love of your life. He opened his mouth. I continued before he could interrupt. When she said no, I looked directly into his eyes. You came home to me. He closed his eyes. He didn't deny it. I never stopped caring about you, he said. The words sounded desperate now. I convinced myself I was just wondering what my life would have looked like. And then, I met her. He swallowed. I realized I'd built up a fantasy. I remained silent. When she rejected me, his voice cracked. I understood what I already had. I nodded slowly. That's the part you still don't understand. He looked confused. I wasn't something you suddenly discovered. I held his gaze. I was the woman who stood beside you when your business failed. He looked down. I stayed when we had to sell your car. Silence. I followed you to another city so you could take a promotion. His fingers tightened together. I postponed having children because you weren't ready. He didn't respond. I spent 10 years believing we were building one life together. I took a slow breath. You spent 10 years comparing it to another one. Tears gathered in his eyes. I'm sorry. I believe you. He blinked. You do. I believe you're sorry now. He reached toward the table. Mimi. I gently moved my hands back. But being sorry doesn't erase what happened. He stared at me. You didn't just send messages. I tapped the printed pages. You didn't just meet Lauren. I paused. You stood in front of everyone we love and called me your backup plan. His face crumpled. I was trying to make a joke. No. My voice remained calm. You were trying to make your truth sound funny. Neither of us spoke after that. There was nothing left to argue. The divorce moved forward quietly over the following months. There were no dramatic courtroom scenes. No shouting matches over property. The house was sold. The proceeds were divided according to the agreement. Our retirement accounts were separated. Each signature closed another chapter. Family members who had laughed during the anniversary toast began reaching out one by one. My cousin Melissa called first. I've replayed that video so many times, she admitted. I should have said something. You weren't the only one. I know. She cried before hanging up. A week later, my aunt invited me to lunch. I thought everyone was laughing because you were laughing. I wasn't. I know that now. Others apologized too. Some sent long messages. Others simply said, I'm sorry. I accepted their apologies. Not because they erased the memory, but because they acknowledged it. Daniel called one afternoon. I owe you something. You already apologized. I owe you the truth too. He told me several friends had confronted Ethan after learning what had really happened. Some were angry about the messages. Others were angry that he'd turned his wife into the punchline of her own anniversary. The group that used to meet every Friday stopped inviting him. Not because he'd made a mistake, because he'd spent months pretending to be someone he wasn't. The image he'd carefully built as the funny, devoted husband had quietly fallen apart. A few months later, my company's vice president called. We still have that regional director position available. The same promotion. The same city. The same opportunity. Years earlier, I had declined it because Ethan didn't want to move. This time I smiled. I'd love to accept. The relocation felt completely different. Not because the city had changed, Because I had. I rented a bright apartment overlooking a small park. For the first time in years, every piece of furniture, every paint color, every weekend plan reflected my own choices instead of compromises. One evening, while unpacking the last moving box, I found the velvet anniversary gift box I'd never given Ethan. I opened it. Inside was the silver watch I'd bought months before our anniversary. I looked at it for a long moment. Then I closed the box. The next day, I returned it to the jeweler. I walked out without looking back. Sometimes people ask whether leaving was difficult. Of course it was. Walking away from 10 years of memories always is. But staying would have required something even harder. Pretending I could forget what I'd heard. Pretending I could believe I was someone's first choice after they'd admitted I wasn't. The anniversary toast didn't destroy my marriage. It revealed the marriage I was already living. And once I saw it clearly, I couldn't unsee it. The night my husband called me his backup plan, he thought he'd embarrassed me for a moment. What he really did was give me the courage to stop being anyone's second choice forever.